All right, let's talk about the French Revolution. We all know the story, right? Liberty, equality, fraternity. It's this grand romantic tale. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at what was really going on. Because underneath all that, the French Revolution was, first and foremost, one of the most spectacular financial train wrecks in all of human history. And I'm not just being dramatic. Let's start with this quote because it really just says it all. We're not talking about a few bad decisions here. We're talking about an economic system so fundamentally backward, so profoundly stupid, it's honestly a miracle the whole country didn't just implode years earlier. So that brings us to the big question for today. What if all those soaring ideals, all that philosophy we learn about in school, wasn't the cause of the revolution, but the symptom? What if the real story, the one that actually mattered, was a much simpler tale about catastrophic debt and a whole lot of people with empty stomachs? Okay, so our first stop on this tour of financial insanity has to be the tax system. Because it wasn't just unfair, it was actively designed to destroy the country from within. It was less a tax plan and more of a national suicide pact. To really get this, you have to see how French society was stacked. You had three official groups, the estates. At the very top, you have the first estate, the clergy, and the second estate, the nobility. Now look at that. Together, they make up a teeny tiny 3% of the population, but they held almost all the wealth and all the land. And the other 97%? Well, that was literally everyone else. And here's where it goes from unfair to just completely absurd. Who paid the taxes that ran the entire kingdom? Not the clergy, not the nobility, 100%. 100% of the tax burden fell on the 97% of people who had the least amount of money. I mean, can you imagine? It's like having two super rich roommates who then stick you with 100% of the rent and bills. It just doesn't work. So there it is, our first big financial lesson. You simply cannot run a major world power by bleeding your poorest citizens dry while the richest people in the country contribute absolutely nothing. That's not a sustainable economic model. That is a ticking time bomb. Okay, so the country's already on shaky ground. What do they do next? They decide to go on a massive spending spree, funded by debt, all for the sake of a very, very petty rivalry.
See, France had been repeatedly humiliated by Great Britain in a series of wars, and they were desperate to get back at them. So when the American colonies decided to revolt, France saw its chance for payback. They jumped in with both feet, pouring over 1 billion livres into funding the American war effort. Now, 1 billion livres sounds like a lot, but to really understand how insane that is, you have to see this. France's entire income for a year, every tax they collected, was only about 500 million livres. They spent more than double their annual salary on this war, and they put it all on the national credit card. And the hangover from that spending spree was absolutely brutal. By the 1780s, over half, more than 50%, of the entire French budget was not going to building roads or paying soldiers or anything useful. It was just going to pay the interest on all that debt. The country was drowning.
And that brings us to financial lesson number 2. Getting revenge on your geopolitical rival might feel good for a minute, but if you do it with money you don't have, you're setting yourself up for a catastrophic failure. It's like building a skyscraper out of Jell-O. It might look impressive for a second, but it's gonna come crashing down in a wobbly mess. So we've seen the big picture mess at the state level, but now let's zoom in, because this is where the financial crisis became a human crisis, a matter of actual life and death at the kitchen table. For your average working class person in France, their entire life, their entire budget, revolved around one single thing: bread. In a good year, a normal year, a family would spend about half of every single penny they earned just on the bread they needed to not starve. But then, a series of bad harvests, combined with some really terrible economic deregulation, caused the price of bread to just explode. By 1789, that 50% of your income for bread shot up to nearly 90%. Just try to imagine that. 9 out of every $10 you make goes to one single food item. There is nothing left for rent, for heat, for clothes, for anything. People weren't just poor, they were actively starving. And that is the most brutal financial lesson of them all. You can talk about free markets and economic theories all day long, but none of it means a thing when people are starving. A person who cannot feed their family has absolutely nothing left to lose. And that is the most dangerous and revolutionary force in the world. So, The Bastille falls, the revolution happens. But the new revolutionary government inherits the exact same problem, an empty bank account. So what was their brilliant solution? Well, it was an idea that sounded great in theory and turned into an absolute disaster in practice. So here's what they did. They seized all the land owned by the Catholic Church, which was a massive amount of real estate. Then they issued these paper notes called assignats. The idea was that each note was basically a deed, a claim on a piece of that confiscated land. It was supposed to be the most secure currency ever created, backed by the best real estate in France. But, well, the temptation was just too great. Whenever the government needed more money, which was constantly, they realized it was way easier to just fire up the printing presses and make more assignats than it was to actually go through the trouble of selling the land. So they printed, and printed, and printed more paper money, and you know exactly what happened next. The value of the currency plummeted, hyperinflation went wild, and the life savings of the entire middle class were completely wiped out. Which leads us to a timeless economic lesson that governments, for some reason, have to keep relearning the hard way. You cannot print your way to prosperity. Firing up the printing press to solve your debt problems is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It never works. With the economy in a total death spiral from hyperinflation, the revolution entered its most radical and violent phase. The government's new economic plan wasn't based on theories anymore. It was based on pure terror. I mean, just look at the disconnect here. The promise was liberty, but the reality was strict price controls that were enforced by the guillotine. They literally passed a law that made it a capital crime for a merchant to charge more than a set price, even if it meant selling at a huge loss. Of course, this just made everyone hide their goods and the shortages got even worse. So, when your economy at home is just a smoking crater, you have to get money from somewhere else. The revolutionary government's solution was war. The French armies were designed to live off the land, which is just a polite way of saying they systematically plundered every country they conquered and shipped the wealth back to Paris. And that's a final dark lesson. An economy built on looting needs endless war just to stay afloat. So after a decade of this absolute chaos of hyperinflation, starvation, terror, and constant war, the French people were just exhausted. They didn't care anymore about the abstract ideals of liberty. They just wanted order. They wanted things to work again. And this brings us to our final and maybe most provocative thought. The revolution that started as a protest against an absolute king ended with the people enthusiastically welcoming an absolute emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. Why? Because he was a dictator, yes, but he also fixed the currency, he balanced the budget, and he made the bakeries run on time. It's a stark reminder that for most people, economic security is more important than political freedom. And it leaves us with a pretty chilling question for our own time. What happens when the basic systems we all depend on just stop running on time?